Greetings, friend, and welcome to the Between the Covers podcast, where we are working every day to remove the self-limiting beliefs that are preventing us from becoming the heroes of our own stories. I am Marcus Spar, and it is time for this month's hero study. And when I was thinking about who I wanted to discuss for this month anyways, there was one person who came to mind, and that is James Earl Jones. It is unfortunate that we have lost such a spectacular individual as James Earl Jones, yet his legacy continues. And while I don't know a lot about his personal story, some of the details that I was able to find in my research are amazing. And so I would like to honor the memory of this incredible man by featuring him as the hero for this hero study. Let's begin. James Earl Jones, and I apologize for this, I did not look how to pronounce the city that he was born in advance. It's Arkabutla, Mississippi, I believe, in 1931. And he has a very interesting early life. His dad left him at a very young age. And it wasn't until the 1950s that the two of them were able to reconcile. However, his father was also an actor, and this was something that seemed to have had an influence on James as he grew up from what we have seen in his life. At the age of 5, he moved to Dublin, Michigan to live with his maternal grandparents. This seems to have been a bit of a traumatic experience for young James, because this move from Mississippi to Michigan and staying with his grandparents, I couldn't even see, I'm guessing his mom wasn't there with him. He was just living with his grandparents. It created a stutter in his speech. And he is quoted as saying, "I was a stutterer. I couldn't talk. So my first year of school was my first mute year. And then those mute years continued until I got to high school." I can't even imagine feeling so insecure about your speech that you would be mute, that you would willingly choose not to talk for at least 9 years. It's a long time. And I can only imagine the impact that had on his ego, on his confidence, on his security. I know that for me, just having a little slip of the tongue, whether we're talking a bizarre moment of, I keep calling it dyslexia, but I'm not dyslexic, but every now and again I do swap words or letters in a word, and sometimes I have Freudian slips, things of that nature. Sometimes I just totally botch the pronunciation of a word. And I know how embarrassing that can be. And here we have someone who, for all of grade school, sounds like all of middle school, don't even know when it was in high school that he started to find his voice, but he chose to not speak. He chose to give that power up because he was afraid of his stutter. He was afraid of how that was going to be portrayed by others. He actually credits one of his high school English teachers, a man named Donald Crouch, for helping him to find his voice. And what his teacher had done is he recognized that James was really good with poetry. And so he challenged a high school James Earl Jones to start reading some of his poetry aloud to the class. In fact, I heard and I read somewhere that it was these efforts to overcome his stutter that helped him develop the iconic voice that he is so well known for. So James finally finds his voice. He's no longer mute. And after, actually, I think it was while he was in high school, he started going down the track of, no, not when he was in high school, sorry. When he was in college, he started going down a track with the military. I read that he was actually trying to go through a pre-med program. And while he was attending the University of Michigan, he joined the Reserve Officers Training Corps. And this was actually something that he thrived in. Now, personally, I am not a military individual. I would not do well in that kind of structured environment when I can barely keep my appointments sometimes. In fact, maybe to a certain degree it'd be good for me. Yet, this was something that he really thrived in. He thrived in the structure. He thrived in the routines and the schedules that he was exposed to while he was training to become a military officer. It was during his junior year at the university, I believe, when he started focusing on drama. And the reason why, and this is something I absolutely love here, he wanted to focus on something that he enjoyed with the expectation that he was going to be deployed, because during this time the Korean War was taking place. So he expected to be deployed at any moment as things were picking up with this war. And kind of surprising, he actually wasn't deployed until the end of the Korean War. It was when the war ended in 1953 that he was actually commissioned. And by the time he was discharged, he had achieved the rank of first lieutenant. There were even some sources that were saying that his regiment was actually sent to the Rocky Mountains, and they were doing a lot of training. They trained a lot of others in how to, I think, survive and how to navigate in some inclement environments in the Rocky Mountains. And it's no small order that he achieved the rank of first lieutenant by the time he was discharged. It was during his time in the Korean War, or not in the Korean War, sorry, when he was in the military, that he had an experience that brought him to become a devout Roman Catholic. Now, I'll get into this more in a later podcast. I have been a Christian. I mean, I guess I've already said that I'm agnostic. I have known a lot of very good Christian individuals. And one of the things, as I was looking at some of the projects that James Earl Jones has in his credits, is there was a narration of the New Testament. This is actually something that he says was the greatest honor in his life, was being able to use his voice to narrate the New Testament of a holy book that he had a lot of affinity for, that he had a lot of respect for. I don't know much about his spirituality and his spiritual life, yet it does seem that it was something that was very serious to him. And he, from what I know, he did no harm to anyone in his beliefs. So I have a lot of respect for him in that. Now, we come to probably what he is most known for, and that is his role in television, cinema, and even dramatic performances. He started out as a Shakespearean actor in performances of Shakespeare in the Park. He was known for Othello and many, many other roles. I only took down Othello, but he performed a lot of Shakespearean plays. I probably should have jotted more down. On top of that, he started to star in some roles in television and then in movies. And this is where I really came to know the voice of James Earl Jones, because I grew up in the 80s. 80s and 90s. My parents were big Star Wars fans. And even, like, my mom is a big Star Trek fan as well. But I grew up with the original trilogy of Star Wars, starting from episode 4 to episode 6. At the time, I did not know who it was that did the voice of Darth Vader. But oh man, did that voice really stick with me. It was so iconic, and for a character, it spoke with such power and authority that I can't imagine anyone else having, or any other voice having, come through that character. Being the naive young kid that I was, I did not recognize that the same voice that did Darth Vader also did the voice of Mufasa in The Lion King. And I loved that movie growing up. And I even, as a teenager, saw Coming to America, and I still didn't even put together that this individual who was the king of this African nation, who was the father of Eddie Murphy's character, was the same person who did the voice of Mufasa and Darth Vader. And as soon as I started making those connections, I realized that this man in James Earl Jones had such an impact on my life. We're talking about someone who embodied so perfectly the knowledge and the maturity of the character of Mufasa, and also the incredible villainy and power and dominance of the character of Darth Vader. Once I knew that, I was in awe of what this man could do. And as I got into his story and saw what he had to overcome, being the product of a broken marriage, in some of my research, I saw that he, not biracial, multi-ethnic. He was African American, Irish, and even Native American. And during the time that he grew up, I can't imagine that that was an easy time to be someone with that ethnicity, to be someone with that kind of background. And yet, he persevered. He overcame. He fought for his voice. And that's something that resonates with me so strongly. I shared how I have struggled with my voice in the past. I have struggled with believing that I have anything of value to say. I have struggled with moments where I've chosen to be mute. Not to the extent that James Earl Jones has done. But it really stood out to me. It really stood out to me how he was able to overcome these traumas, these experiences in his life. He was able to reconcile with his dad. He was able to take something that was a hindrance to him in life early on and turn it into one of his greatest assets. And when I hear of someone who has done something like that, it gives me hope that I can do something similar. I don't expect to be anywhere near the level of someone as magnanimous as James Earl Jones. Yet I am thankful that I was able to experience this man. I was able to experience his story and see some of his work in through years of my life. If someone were to ask me that stereotypical question that comes up a lot of if you could talk with anyone living or dead, who would that be? I would imagine that I would want to be able to sit down and have a conversation with James Earl Jones. And I don't even know what I would talk with him about, honestly. But he is just someone who I wish I could have gotten to know better, really. He seemed like such an incredible person, such a nice person, such a mature and strong man. And it makes me wonder what could have been different in my story if I had the influence of someone such as him in my life. Granted, a lot of what I've seen from him has come from movies, interviews, things where, I don't know, maybe he's putting on some kind of persona or he's putting on a professional image or something like that. But there is a not insignificant part of me that looks at this individual and is like, man, I really hope that what I saw on the television screen was how he was to everyone in life. And I don't know that. I honestly don't know. In my research, a lot of it just comes down to his film career. It comes down to movies and roles that he was a part of. And yet, I think probably The thing that stands out to me the most was his role when he was playing himself in Big Bang Theory. And the time that he got to spend with the character of Sheldon, and just his smile and all the fun he was having. He ding-dong ditches Carrie Fisher, and I think of his laugh as she is standing on this porch and she's like, "James, this isn't funny," and you hear him in the distance, "Then why am I laughing? Ha 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 ha." And that, just hearing that kind of stuff just makes me light up with joy. I know that it's naive of me to look at these performances and apply them to the person. And yet, when I think about these iconic characters in these performances, they did something to me. They brought joy. They brought security and peace and wisdom. And they brought respect. And the only thing that I hope I can do is I hope that I can give even the smallest minutia of respect back to him through this episode. Now, I'm not a person who really believes in heaven or hell. I'm not a person who knows or thinks that it's possible to know what takes place outside of this mortal coil. If what James Earl Jones believes is true, then I sincerely hope that he is in a very good place, full of love, full of joy. I did not expect to get emotional talking about this here. I hope that he knows, or he knew, the impact that he has had on so many people. Even someone as insignificant as Marcus Spar, a sometimes troubled 40-year-old white man that, to a certain degree, a lot of people aren't going to know about. Wherever you are right now, James Earl Jones, thank you. Thank you for your voice. Thank you for the gifts that you gave us. Thank you. I don't really have anything else that I can say here. I hope that you have enjoyed this little dive into a miraculous individual. And until next time, live strong for today.